One is essentially we are going to talk about the transformations in CPG supply chains. We have lined up a series of speakers who could shed some light on it. This is a panel with a difference. The major difference here is that I'm going to invite the panelists on stage, and each panelist will get dedicated time to speak about a subject within this overall transformation of the CPG supply chains. The panelists will speak for around 8 to 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer session from the audience. So without any delay, I would like to invite my panelists for this transformation of the CPG supply chains. Saurabh Lal, Director Supply Chain India and South Asia, Kellogg Company. So if you could please come on to the panel, it will be nice. Ashok Kumar, he's leading supply chain planning and logistics for Britannia Industries. Ashish Pande. Ashish Pande from Nestlé. He's the head of supply chain South Asia region, Nestlé. I would like to start the discussions by the way, good afternoon, all of you. I didn't wish you good afternoon when I started it. Sorry. Good afternoon, Ashok. Good afternoon, Saurabh. Good afternoon, Ashish.
Good afternoon,
and thank you for taking time off. I would like to start the proceedings by inviting Saurabh Lal to make his presentation. He will discuss the key management challenges in a successful supply chain transformation and how to manage stakeholder interests. Saurabh, it's over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Girish. Just a second, guys.
Yes, it's visible.
Visible.
It's visible.
Okay, cool. It's very difficult to follow up after Dr. John. He's obviously a big-time expert, and Girish, by putting me in front, I think you put me in a bit of a spot. I do have a few slides, however. I thought these are important parameters that we should be discussing, and I wholeheartedly agree with what Dr. John had said. We must focus on processes and core supply chain principles. That's the most important piece, which the recent developments have taught us. If your core supply chain is built around solid principles of supporting the business and serving to customer demand, you've got resilient supply chain built in as part of the process. There's no reason why you won't be able to ride out any type of a crisis, as has been shown by a number of companies who are able to restore their operations and come back on track. So what I thought today is, it's a very vast subject, and having a very few minutes, I thought what's very much important is talk about the core principles first, particularly true for what's the supply chain should look upon in the future. And I've got 4 parameters that I've listed down here. The supply chain has to be digital, and it has to be intelligent. It has to be able to have the ability to adapt, the ability to sort of think for itself, and therefore focus on what the business needs are. Number 2, it needs to be automated. The events, the way they change, the way the data flows, the sheer quantum of data that we are faced with today, all of it cannot be handled by humans alone. The human being will be incapable of taking the type of quick decisions that we need to take. And therefore, an automated supply chain is going to be extremely important. For me, I also think that it's not going to be only about AI and ML. At least in the next decade, we should see much more of human-assisted algorithms coming into play, wherein we are assisted with systems and processes which help us make better decisions. And as the system learns and evolves and adapts, we can leave more and more of those normal transactional day-to-day activities to the system, and thereby freeing up the human mind to do the next level of work. The next important thing for me is going to be around interconnections. And this interconnection is not just within the supply chain, it's also within the company. How well are you interconnected with the developments that the R&D organization is doing? How well are you connected with what marketing wants to do in terms of its, or let's say its marketing campaigns? How well is the supply chain connected to that? How well are you integrated with the sales pieces? A very big piece that we learned is sales are going to be increasingly driven by promotion activities, and that probably is going to be a campaign type of a supply chain, right? It goes in, it goes out. How well are you interconnected to understand when that system needs to be activated and when do you take it offline? And finally, the biggest and most important thing that we have been taught is around human relationships and courage. A plant cannot run unless people are there. And we saw when the lockdown was announced for 7 days, 15 days, month, 2 months, unless the people were willing to come to work, unless we were able to provide the safe environment for people to come to work, courage alone is not going to be important, but that is what would enable people to come to work. The second big thing around human relationships is, your suppliers are going to be equally impacted as you are. When he restarts, there are going to be 20 people who are going to be jumping on him to say they should be supplied first. And this is where we found human relationships supporting each other in times of need is what came out very, very strongly. And finally, the supply chain has to be business focused and not supply chain KPIs focused. And I've seen a lot of supply chain managers make this mistake, trying to focus on improving the KPIs while forgetting that what's important for the business today is not necessarily your KPI, it's getting the product out in the market to the consumer who's ready to buy it at that time. If I take the next step to say, and mostly around transformation, we're going to be talking about digital. There are a lot of physical transformations which are required, and I think all of us are pretty well aware in the supply chain team, whether it is around network design, warehouse design, or plant efficiency improvements. But for me, digital, one of the few learnings that I had is, and it's a personal learning, right? We carried out an ERP change, and we said that we've undergone a digital transformation. And as I worked with the various companies who had different type of ERP systems, I realized that the core ERP is essential, remains a transactional piece. And what is very, very important to note today is there are many, many companies who can build upon your core transactional ERP and provide you the type of digital transformation that you need, probably at a much lower cost and suited to the type of business that you have. On top of the transactional ERP, you build your analytics and analysis platform. You may have your the supply chain control tower built here. And the second piece is you can take that same data and you can build your decisions and actions around it. It's not possible for every company to undergo a whole-scale replacement of their ERP. It's very expensive. It takes time. It causes business disruption. And honestly, I've worked where people were still completely on Excel base, and only a few of the invoicing and order taking, etc., were on ERP, and we still made decent efficiency decisions. But what was important is, did we build on top of that? And I'll come to the next chart. In essence, around digitization itself. And this was a talk I had given at NITI a couple of years back. And I said that digitization in alone is not the solution. For example, we go for shared taxis at one point of time, right? And when you open the app, you know where the nearest cab is, you know what the price is, and it helps you decide what to do. But it does not necessarily mean that a cab is going to be available. Because lots of times when you open the tab, especially at peak hours, we find that the cabs are just not available. So just a digital solution itself is not going to be the solution. And if you look at, people who are in Mumbai, you will see that the local trains which have been running for many, many decades have got a display system at every station. And people in Mumbai time their travel as per these, the train timings. And this system works pretty well. It is fit for the purpose that we have, right? And that's very, very important when we carry out a transformation. There are three very, very specific points. assuming that your supply chain strategy is driving the transformation plan, and you are not undergoing a transformation or a change just because it is good to do or because everyone else is doing it, right? So any transformation that you do, whether in the physical world or a digital world, has to be built for a compelling business need. For example, if we find today that a lot of projections about growth of e-commerce in 2025, people have found that the growths have been achieved in 2020 itself, right? If your company is undergoing a similar type of push in or a change in the channels through you serve, that's a compelling business need. And that's the channel that's the specific transformation that you need to build. So is it going to be how do I put it? The e-commerce supply chain itself works differently. For those in the CPG industry, you need to take an appointment. It's a very fixed time. You need to send everything exactly. You're sending everything in cases, but in case something comes back from the e-com channel, they're going to send it to you back in pieces. Right? There is no way that you're going to be able to take it back into your system. How are you going to design for that? How are you going to ensure that your truck reaches with all the stuff intact? It has been stickered because that stickering is an additional work that you need to do, and it reaches there when it is required, right? So how are you going to build your supply chain around that? Also, e-commerce companies have got a huge amount of data which is readily available for us to tap into, which can help us drive our own efficiencies. So that's the first piece. Decide what's the compelling business need, and your supply chain must be designed, or your transformation must be designed around it. The second piece is it has to be fit for purpose, right? And I talked about it earlier. It has to be for process improvements versus just saying that I will take care of some KPIs in my system. When you improve the process, you improve the health of the overall chain, your KPIs will follow in terms of improvement. The third piece here is going to be it has to deliver value. A lot of times we want to do things and then we go back and say that the business is not supporting me. And for me, the biggest, there were a lot of people who have asked me, how do I get my business to support what I'm doing? And the first thing that if I put in as saying that there are 3 or 4 different stakeholders, right? The first stakeholder obviously is going to be a finance guy. And he is going to look at, say, does it deliver me value? Do I get a return on my investment that I'm going to make here? And the decision here would be what type of a solution you're choosing, what type of a cost does it bring in, does it require too many changes, can it sit on top of the current thing that you are having? Is it suited to what you are trying to do? Can it be done at a lower cost? And fortunately, even in India today, there are many people who are offering custom built solutions at a low cost, which can be deployed quickly so that you get your ROI. Any changes that you do have to result in a business benefit, either increase sales or lower cost, and therefore they will be an ROI. You just have to look deeper and harder into it. The second person who would come from a supply chain transformation bit would be the sales guys. So for him, it's going to be very important. His own need is whenever I demand a product, I should be able to get it. Right? He's not interested in what is your plant efficiencies, what is the changeover issues that you're going to have, what are the manpower issues you're going to have. So the piece for him is going to be is how do you tell them this is the improvement that you will see on the ground once I have implemented this change. Don't try to dig too much into the complexities or the principles of the change. Focus on what is in it for him. The third big piece is around your CEO. And for me, I've been fortunate enough to have worked with some great CEOs who understand what supply chain is all about, who understand the nitty-gritties. But with my CEOs, my biggest first thing has been, I want to do it, but let me prove it to you by putting pen on paper. So in one of the companies, we wanted to do a theory of constraints based, a dynamic buffer management type of a piece. And the cost of the implementation was going to be around 2 crores. Obviously, no one is going to put down that type of money unless the system is proven. So we ran a manual setup in parallel. Every week, we spend 8 hours looking at what the requirements are, changing the inventory by hand, focusing on 150 SKUs. We managed to significantly improve the fill rates Then we went back and said, this is the advantage that you are going to get. And this, if I can do it with the automation, I can probably give you another 1% improvement in the growth of the company. And that becomes a very compelling piece for the CEO to do. A lot of times, supply chain guys automatically assume that everyone knows about the principles that we are talking about. It is not true. They are very, very, of course, very, very smart people across in other businesses. But go down, prove, show that proof of concept that we talk about. Okay, put pen to paper, and there is no reason why someone will be going against the logic that you are putting. So broadly, that was from my side, a very quick presentation, and I do hope it makes some sense to all of you.
Thank you, Saurabh. Before we take up questions, I would like to invite Ashok Kumar. Ashok will be talking to us on how to create resilience in supply chain, essentially the challenges facing the CPG supply chain and developing resilient supply chains that are both digital and agile. Ashok, you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kirish. Is the audio clear?
Yeah, your audio is clear.
Okay. So I don't have a presentation. I'm going to talk through a few minutes, and then we'll open it for questions if you like. So resilient supply chains. See, when we experienced this pandemic, that's when we were put to true test, really. And I think everybody was really caught off guard. We also, and I must say that we were quickly, fortunate to quickly get it off the ground. So I think what happened in that is 2 or 3 things. What happened. I'll talk about what happened, and I'll talk about what are the learnings so that we can apply that in the future and create a more resilient supply chain. What actually happened was people. If you look at it everywhere, people became the most important factor. So factories to produce, people to go and sell. In a CPG kind of an environment that actually drives the whole system. So how to de-risk that was the biggest thing. That is one side of it. Second side of it was how to understand what's going on, and how to dynamically adjust and see what can be done. The regular theories of supply chain in terms of forecast drives, production, etc., went out of the window, really. So really, we were up for a different kind of a situation. We were fortunate to have some inventory in the system when it all hit us. But I think it's a matter of time when, particularly when our kind of industry, when the essential goods opened up, we could start supplying, and inventory started going down. So the question is, how do we put it back, and how do you manage the show? Now, that is when the resiliency of the supply chain comes in terms of how to manage the temporary situation. I would call it a temporary situation. That's not a sustainable model, But the important thing is to manage the temporary phase of the pandemic, where we had to get together and look at Pareto's and look at things very differently, and that is okay for the consumer. The consumer is forgiving in terms of a period of time when if he or she doesn't get the variety of products, it is still manageable. So we quickly got together. I think the business continuity plans, which were happening every day, at least, was coming into play, and we decided dynamically what to do. And I think that played a big role in terms of doing local sourcing. I think we talked about in one of the earlier situations. We talked about product substitution, because it's not just about manufacturing and sales. It's also about procurement and getting the product, because everything was coming to a standstill. The Chinese thing came in before that, and all that. So we looked at end to end, and we managed to, to cut a long story short, we managed to create an 80-20 principle and run with that 80-20. What that did is we managed to use the people more effectively, and I'm coming back to people, and do that. Same thing happened with sales. On the other side, on sales also, we did a similar thing in terms of the landscape was changing in the sales front because the kirana shops were not open in the initial phase of the pandemic. The wholesales were running the show. The modern trade retail was running the show. The e-com became exploded really. Like Saurabh said, 2025 got achieved in 2020 itself. And we are not prepared for it, right? As an industry, as a business, we are not prepared for it. But we then looked at, setting some. We need to fix some band-aid solutions to it first time being. But the most important thing, that is where it's important to understand that what COVID-19 pandemic did to us is, and if you have to really get, into a resilient supply chain, what we need is to pick up the learnings and apply it for a sustained model. Otherwise it's a flash of the pan. It'll just come in and we'll all react and manage the situation. Okay. So first and foremost, what we did is we recognized the changing landscape. We realized that this is here to stay. The changing landscape is here to stay. Because people are changing their way of working. The habit is changing. I'm not suggesting that the general trade, modern trade ratios will drastically differ, but it is changing. It is changing and accelerating pretty fast, particularly the e-com omni-channel thing, more than the modern trade. The modern trade also is, getting more and more converged with fewer people, not because of the pandemic, because of other reasons. And it's very important, therefore, to how do you get velocity and how do you get to the customer faster, effective, and most cost efficient. Okay, so that the pandemic really taught us, because we had if a product moves from point A to point C through point B, we had cut short, and we made sure that it moves from point A to point C, and we would have done this probably 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line. It really accelerated the journey in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. It did two things, right? It does two things in terms of it reaches the product fast, it's much fresher, and also your wastages in the supply chain reduces. Then you find ways of managing this whole point A to point C transition. Okay, so that's one important piece which we have picked up. So we moved from so we have something called direct dispatch. We have it in early double-digit numbers. We moved to 25-30% during the COVID period, and what we've done is we picked up what could be sustained. Everything cannot be sustained, but we really probably doubled the whole thing. As a result, your products are moving faster. Your inventories are it gives an opportunity to look at inventories, and invest that money in something very different. Second thing is about looking at the whole automation piece, because all of this, when you do this, you can do that for a period of time with high touch. Okay, but you cannot do it on a prolonged basis, and you need therefore digitization. And we had some digitization journey which is going on, and we accelerated the whole piece, and we set up 2 control towers, one for logistics, another one for customer service. And the control towers, what it does is, in terms of gives you end-to-end visibility of what's going on. It really tells you what to do, what not to do, what are the touch points, where can you navigate 45 degrees to get a 45-degree turn, and things like that. And that really helped us in terms of setting ground rules, setting our themes for our transformational themes for our future budgets, AOPs, long-term plans, etc., etc. So it changed the direction in which it is going. Last but not least, this is the last point I'm making, is that what risk assessment. I think our risk assessment levels pre-pandemic has been very different from what we are doing now. We are now looking at, we are trying to anticipate things. A real business continuity plan is all about a lot of what ifs, and really thinking through what could go wrong, and what are the other alternates which are there readily available to back it up and bring you up to speed. So these combination of these sustained learnings from the pandemic and putting it back into business, making it more resilient, is what I think we are on a journey. I wouldn't say that we have reached anywhere. We are on the journey, and that is what I think it will help us. coupled with risk assessment for the future, anticipating things which are not really seen. That's what COVID taught us. That's all, Dr. Girish. Over to you. Am I audible? Was I audible, Girish?
You're audible. You are audible, sir. That's very nicely put. A lot of organizations have a lot of learnings which they accumulate over a period of time, and unless they are captured and carried forward, the whole purpose of managing that knowledge, because the whole new area of knowledge management becomes equally important going forward. And the way you articulate it in terms of resilience, sustainability, and also the use of technology to bring in better visibility and able to preempt or at least anticipate problems and have a plan B is a very interesting option. I thank you very much for it. I would now invite Ashish Pande from Nestlé to talk to us about the whole concept of planning and how transformations in planning are also a core area of, and how organizations like Nestlé have mastered the art of this transformation from the planning process, a planning-centric view of it. Ashish, over to you, 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Girish. I think you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I think an SNOP planning is something which is very close to my heart, and I think all supply chain managers spend a lot of time in trying to create an efficient and effective SNOP process. So I think it's an ongoing improvement process, and the COVID really shook us, and we had to look at SNOP process in a very, very different way from the traditional ways of working. So what I have gathered is that post-COVID, the supply chain manager has to wear two main hats. And the first hat is of customer and consumer centricity, right? It's not that we were not wearing this hat before, but we have to increase the size of the hat, right? We have to increase the radar. And second, the hat that we have to wear in a way that we think and act like a CEO and understand the business priorities. And I'll give you the examples of both. Now, when I say consumer and customer centricity, we have seen that there's a lot happening in this space. Let's look at consumers. Consumers have spent a lot of time at home. We know that post the lockout, we've been spending more time at home. Our families have been spending more time at home. So the food habits, and I'm talking from food FMCG perspective, have also changed. Since kids stay at home, they need more snacks. They need more meals, small meals, right? If the adults are staying at home, all the food that we used to eat in office canteens and going out, all that is gone. Out of home channel is gone. So people are consuming more and more food at home. Now, once that happens, what people are looking at is food which is trusted, of good quality, of a trusted brand, right? Food which is exciting, right? So from product to meal solutions, right? Anything which helps in immunity, health and wellness, and obviously the taste part. So there are a lot of consumer habits which are changing. I'll not get into details. All of us know this. So this is one part that the supply chain manager needs to keep a close tab with either consumer insights team or market research team, that what are these consumer habits and how are they evolving, and how do they then impact the buying behavior and then translating into demand planning. Second is the customer centricity. We have seen the customer landscape totally changing. The e-commerce segment took off. We have some products in our portfolio where the demand went up by 5 times during the pandemic. The e-com penetration, I think, has increased substantially. What it was supposed to do in next 3 years, it was done in these 6 months. So we need to understand these dynamics of channel proliferation, channel strategies. So we need to keep a very close touch with our customers. And I've got a lot of insights while talking to all my customers. I make it a point to call them at least once in a month, have a full-scale discussion, because they are also planning a lot of things. And if we are not in sync with what the customers are planning, we'll never be able to be partner of choice with our customers. So broadly speaking, these two hats, the customer and consumer centricity, that's one hat that we need to enhance, sharpen. Other is the business hat. Now, we know that SNOP planning is basically there are three elements which are there in S&OP planning: the commercial strategy or the commercial planning, the operational planning, and the financial planning. And it's our role to make sure that these are synchronized very, very efficiently. Now, we all believe that we do this and we do a good job, but things are changing now. Now, if you speak to your business manager or CEO, and if the business strategy for any product is to gain market share, okay, and gain market share by introducing new products, by offering value for money, or for offering formats which are more conducive for consumption, and so on and so forth. And if we design our supply chain in such a way that there is no flexibility in supply chain to cater to these business requirements, then we are not doing justice. So I'll give you an example. We launched some new products post COVID in Q3, and plan was to go very quickly and rapidly increase numeric distribution. Now, if I had given instruction to my team that, look, work on just in time, work on lean inventory, make sure that there is no excess inventory, and if there is any surplus demand, then the agility that we have in the supply chain is very, very different. So we need to adapt this. We need to understand if the business strategy is to increase numeric distribution, increase household penetration, then we need to be flexible and agile and make sure the inventory and manufacturing processes are aligned accordingly. Now, if the strategy is to optimize operating profit and invest behind the brands in terms of media, PFME, and so on and so forth, then the actions that we need to take in operation S&OP planning are very, very different. So these are two examples that I wanted to explain where the supply chain manager has to integrate the business strategy into a well-woven S&OP strategy, which the teams understands, and team can then take cues from consumer, customers, and the data that we are getting, pivot themselves very quickly to support the business growth. Otherwise, as Saurabh was saying, that we'll have brilliant supply chain KPIs, but we may or may not have optimal business results, and what do we want to achieve. So this is one part that is very, very important. It's not that supply chain managers are not doing this. All of us do this, but we have to do much more, and we have to align our teams across the commercial and operations and finance organizations to understand this. If everybody understands this, our job is over. Then people will take their own action. So that's one part. Second part is what I call about weekly cadence and a monthly cadence. Now we know that all our statistical forecasting, past history, and the way we used to do forecasting is sometimes not very efficient. I would even throw out all the data that I have in my planning system from Q2 because that has no collaboration or no corroboration of what is going to happen in future or in the past. So what we need to move towards in our supply chain is a weekly cadence process so that we have end-to-end visibility of value chain. We see what is the offtake with our modern trade, e-com, and traditional trade customers, if we can, through our systems and data. We see how our customers are ordering. We see what inventories we are keeping. How are our manufacturing and co-manufacturing units adapting to that and moving towards a good replenishment process? How our suppliers are moving towards it? Okay, do they understand the demand signal changes and they are able to adopt? And all this on a weekly basis. Now, this is a control tower that a supply chain manager need to have, that how are the customer orders coming in? What is out of stock in e-com that we can see on a weekly basis? Now, when we see this data, are we translating this data into ensuring supply processes, right? Similarly, if there's a DC throughput has an issue, if there is a big day, are we geared up to supply to all our customers 2x of their demand 2 weeks before the big day? Do we have we designed our supply chain accordingly? If we are launching a new product, do our suppliers have the capability to supply that special packaging or raw material that we need? So there's a weekly control tower that the supply chain manager needs to have, and he has to then start orchestrating across the value chain with his team, with commercial colleagues, with finance colleagues, and make sure that we cater to entire consumer demand. So a lot of times I've seen that I have to go back to my business manager and say, guys, what you're doing is working very well. Please step up the gas, do more of it. We will align ourselves, because these people would normally wait for post-evaluation data to come in and then take action. So sometimes we have to do it. Sometimes we have to go to our CFO and say, look, this time in next 3 months, I'm going to increase working capital. our cash flow will be impacted by 15-20%. Please manage your working capital financing accordingly, because this is required for growth. And people appreciate that. So the orchestration on a weekly and monthly basis and weekly and monthly cadence that I talk about is very, very important for the supply chain manager. And the third part is the tools. Now, we have so many tools for connected planning end to end. And I think from our organization, we have been always shy to use these tools. We always have used tools which are in silos across the value chain. So my request to all supply chain managers would be that look at a connected tool for end-to-end management, whatever is feasible for you, whatever is applicable for you, and then implement it very quickly. Otherwise, the orchestration that you will have to do on a manual basis is huge. So if you have a tool which can synchronize your material ordering with the customer order change, which is happening on a weekly basis, looking at total delivered cost, looking at whatever constraints that you put in is in place, and it is not left to individual silos to optimize, it will be very, very, very good. So these are the three things I'll recommend. One is wearing those two hats of consumer and customer strategy and thinking. Business, think like your CEO. Spend some time with your CEO on a regular basis. You will understand what the CEO is looking for, and then start in making sure that the whole value chain understands. Move towards a weekly and monthly cadence. Do that orchestration across the value chain so that you pick up the signals both of up and down and translate into the value chain. And third part is the connected planning and control towers. Whatever you can automate across your value chain, do it. This is the right time. There are a lot of tools and solutions available. And if you can do these three things well, and if you are doing it efficiently, I think this is a full recipe for winning at marketplace in my view.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashish. It was very, very, very well articulated. In fact, the whole concept of strategic fit, aligning your business goal and supply chain goals so that the end consumer with end consumer centricity as the mantra. I think that's what really defines ourselves as supply chain professionals, and that's what is the goal. And as you very clearly put it, yes, you need support for that. You need to be able to not only you need to even understand your CEO and the way your CEO thinks, so that you can step up your game. And I also like the point where you said that go to your CFO, tell him that this is what I'm doing for the sake of the business. Go to the marketing. So from being an insular, a back office kind of a function, the transformation of the back office into a true business enabler, wearing the hat of customer centricity, wearing the hat of business, and becoming a business person. That is indeed a good transformation, that story that we can take forward. I would like to now look at the questions which some people have sent us. I have one on, yes. Anuruddha Karnataki from has asked us a question on visibility and control tower creation. What is the appropriate starting point? Who would like to? Saurabh, you want to take a shot at that?
I would love to, but don't. We are still working on our control tower. So I guess the starting point would be a dashboard, right, of the core. I'm assuming that you're trying to ask that I want to set up a control tower, and how should I go about it, right? And for me, since we are also trying to set up a control tower, for me, the first starting point has been a dashboard, right? And that dashboard gives me relevant information around all the products that we do at a CFA level, norm versus inventory. Right. So for me, that's the most important piece that I'm looking at now. Being a smaller business, we don't have too many trucks, etc. So for me, trucking visibility, and we have seen truck efficiency is not the key point here. So that's the first point that I look at. Second point for me is the production, right, and the plan versus actual on a day-to-day basis, which tells me basically what's my forward-looking fulfillment rate is going to be. And the last bit is for me here is around sales versus estimates. that just tells me broadly how is the sales picking up. Is it ahead of the plan? Is it on the plan? I'm trying to still, there's a lot more elements which will come into a control tower. But for me, this simple dashboard is the starting point for the day, which tells me a few specific elements that we can start off with. We want to add more and more elements and then get this automated so that maybe efficiency information, maybe number of trucks, maybe loading efficiency, all of those things can also come in, which will probably give us the areas which are weak, which we need to focus on a immediate daily or a weekly basis. Probably Ashish or Ashok will be able to add more to it.
Yeah, thanks, Saurabh, and I totally understand what you're trying to do. My only advice to all my colleagues who are starting the control tower would be that, look, start from whatever you have. Your starting point has to be of creating value to your customers and to your suppliers. So please start from customer order visibility and delivery to customers. If you go and ask any customer today in India, what is the most important thing that they value? It's on time and full. Yes, they will talk about a lot of other things, but by and large, all of them will talk about, are you delivering me on time and full or not? So start with that visibility to your customers, have a control tower, which can then show you what are the customer orders, what is the delivery time, what is the quantity, what is the ATP availability, and are you delivering it? And you can go as granular as you want. You want to see it daily, you want to see it by hour, or whatever it is. And are your customers able to see? So that's the starting point. Create value for your customers with the control tower. If they value on time and full, do they have the satisfaction that the company is providing that information and along with the information delivering it also? Then work with your suppliers. The suppliers, whenever you go to and talk to your suppliers, what is the most important thing that they value? They will talk about forward forecast and reliability of that forecast. Yes, there are a lot of other things that they can talk about in terms of collaboration, in terms of value creation. But the most important thing for them is a forward forecast, which is well balanced and not volatile. So set up a control tower where you can work with your suppliers and see that what is happening within your organization, what is the visibility that you're giving to your suppliers. Is it 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever you have agreed, and what is the reliability of that forecast, and how suppliers are delivering against that in terms of supplier service level. So my request will be, start with these two things: customers on time and full, suppliers in terms of helping them improve visibility of forecast and delivering. Once you have done these two things, then it is up to you to integrate your entire value chain, which is in your hand. What you're producing on a daily basis, what you're dispatching, what is your inventory, where your trucks are, what are you doing with your assets, and so on and so forth. It is your internal thing, right? Which is important, huh? It is also important because unless you have a control of all this, you will not be able to control the other two things. But my request is, start from your customers and suppliers, to create a control tower which the supply chain manager has a visibility, and down the line people have visibility. Get visual if you can. For me, it's very, very important. I always expect my control towers to be very, very visual. I don't want to open BI reports and start looking at it. Yes, we need all those details, but I want a computer screen or a big television screen which says what's my today's OTIF by customer, by channel, by geography. Similar thing on the suppliers, and then you build it. So that will be my take on it.
Thanks. There's a question for Ashok. Predominance and focus on e-com post-pandemic is understandable. The question was asked by Ingrid Saxena. What learnings post-pandemic were emerged for modern trade? Yes, Ashok. I think you're on mute, sir.
Hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there was a problem with my mic. Okay. Is it clear?
Yeah.
I think if I understand the question, it's about e-commerce clear, what's happening in the modern trade. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay, so modern trade has gone through a bit of a yo-yoing thing. What's happening is We saw in the initial period, we saw modern trade growing reasonably big time, while e-commerce growing at enormous rates. We see a slowdown in the modern trade piece, but I think that's temporary, because the general trade and the modern trade in our kind of CPG industry is still, general trade plays a very prominent role, and modern trade is supposed to be driving. So what's happening is, the reason why modern trade did not fire really is there are big players in modern trade who actually went underground, who have merged with other players, and that resulted in their buying patterns and all that. They had credit limit issues with people, and the big ones, the big ones, right? And that played a role in the modern trade. The SAMTs, or the standalone modern trades, etc., chugging along reasonably well. So modern trade, in the pre-pandemic, initial period of the pandemic, we saw modern trade coming out, and there are restrictions on footfalls and all that. How many people can enter the store and how many people can be in the store, etc. But if I have to say what will be the scene, I think it will continue to chug along at a reasonably good growth model compared to a general trade. May not be as high as e-com.
Thanks. Ashok, there was also one added question to that. How would you measure resilience?
In modern trade?
Yes.
In modern trade?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
both. If you could just talk about both. There has been when the pandemic hit, the whole thing went for a toss, and now the things are reverting back to some kind of a newer base. How do you measure resilience when you have no history? I think probably that's what the question means.
So in modern trade particularly, I'll talk about modern trade particularly when the pandemic hit us. I'll tell you what we did really, and if you elaborate a bit, what we did really was we have something called DC. Most of our modern trade servicing is DC, which means we service from our DC to the modern trade DC, and they take over the entire store operations. During the pandemic, because as I said earlier, people was the biggest challenge. They had issues also, like we have issues. So they came back to us, collaborated with us, and we got into this is where the resilience come into play. We got into a new model of DSD. DSD was an unknown element to us because we have done very little DSD. Okay, direct store delivery, which means you are still directly sending it to the store, and so the MOQs are different. Everything is very different in a DSD compared to a DC. The scale reduces drastically, so that is one thing we did to help us during the pandemic. Now post-pandemic, wherever we have seen some efficiencies have kept in a DSD model, because it is reducing one touch, but it's also taking control over their in stocks in the shelf, which is their moment of truth. We have been we've reverted back to some of them, but not 100%. There are some has moved over to a DSD model. Okay, that is one. The other one is the collaboration. The collaborative work with the chains have amplified big time, and that is the key thing. Actually, when we talked about controller in the previous question also, I think the visibility and how do you reach out to the customer, how do you understand what's going on there, is a very important factor for us to navigate our backend and our act. So these are the two things which we did during the pandemic very differently, and some of them stayed, some of them has reverted back because efficiencies are also important to deliver.
Thank you. I hope that answered it, and I think we are right on time. I think it's time to. I wish to thank Saurabh, Ashish, and Ashok for taking us through your own journeys of transformation, where Saurabh talked about the enterprise picture. Ashish brought in the planning and the customer centricity part of it, and Ashok talked about resilience and how do I build, how do I marry technology and resilience and create that huge the transformation journey. And it was very interesting to note these transformation journeys. I hope the audience has been equally